Good morning, everybody. Oh, that was weak. Come on. Good morning. There we go. Good to see you all. You guys get out of here. No, I'm just kidding. Have fun, kiddos. If you're new here, just so you do know, we have kids' church. That's why all the kids were heading out. So if you got kids, they can roll there. We're not punishing them or anything. Those aren't the bad kids. Hey, I was at a Halloween party yesterday. How many of you guys were at a Halloween-ish thing the last 2 days or whatever? Yeah, a lot of us. I went there, and there was a guy who will remain nameless who came sauntering into the party kind of late, fashionably late, came in, and he had, his costume was like just down to perfection. He had, the little bow tie. He had like a really, sweet white shirt that was really extra tight, and he had these slacks, and he had, tape on these super Urkel glasses, and I was like, hey man, what are you? And he's like, I'm you, George. And I was like, I've got to say, it kind of ruined my Halloween. Not just because of last night, but because when I was getting ready this morning, washed my hair, got all my stuff ready, going to do contacts, and I was like, no, contacts will hurt my eyes. And I put my glasses on, and I looked in the mirror, and I was like, oh crap, he's right. So, I tried to break the trend today with this shirt I stole from Sarah. My wife's pregnant, and we're having a child, and we're pretty excited about it. But I didn't know that especially if you find out you're having a girl, that the girl is like a game changer. Like there's all of a sudden like colors of the room and of like certain things that you buy, like everything you buy is like coordinated and very specific. How many of you guys knew this? Why didn't you tell me this? Why didn't you tell me this? It's very, very important, but we're super excited about it, and that's kind of what's going on in our life. We've been doing a series over the last year on Matthew. It's the book of Matthew. Matthew's kind of one of the biographers that writes about Jesus' life, tells his story, and brings us insights into what Jesus was about, who he hung out with, what his intentions were, and what he accomplished. And so we've been marching through this for the last year. The last 2 months, we've been doing some other series, but we're jumping back into Matthew. And I want to invite all of you guys to jump back into this story. And we'll kind of be picking up, and you'll see some of the pieces that, if you haven't been with us before, it's okay. There'll be some stuff that kind of brings you up to speed pretty easily. And we'll be jumping right into that. And a lot of this book is about Jesus' kingdom, God's kingdom, his reign, his activity, his power in the world, changing issues, changing injustices from injustices into justice, causing people who have been lost to be found, helping people who couldn't see with spiritual eyes to see, and he's radically changing the world. And the biggest thing is we're seeing Jesus reconcile lost people to God. Reconcile means bringing together, and we're seeing his kingdom at work. And so that's what a lot of this book, a lot of this series has been on. If you want to, you can turn with me. We're just going to kind of jump right on in here, and we're going to start in Matthew 15. We're going to be kind of covering a section that's from Matthew 15, verse 32 to the end of 15, which is a few short verses. And then we're going to cover a little bit the very beginning of chapter 16, 1 through 12. Okay, so that's where we're going to be. And if I could kind of just put a cap on what we're going to be learning today, and if we could walk away with anything, it's just this simple, I think what we're going to be seeing, what we're going to be hearing, what we're going to be feeling from the message in these passages, in these words, is this. I think we're going to be learning to listen to Jesus. We're going to be learning to trust Jesus. And then we're going to learn to adjust our lives to what Jesus is doing. Okay? So listen, trust, and what? Adjust. All right? So that's going to be a big portion of what this passage is about. So keep that in mind. Let's pick up in verse 32 of chapter 15. It says this: Then Jesus called his disciples together. And just so you know, when Jesus is calling his disciples together, they've been on this holy, awesome, rolling rampage of Holy Spirit power. They've been healing people, Jesus has been healing people. People are crippled, people are blind, people who just need him bad. They've got all these physical maladies and issues, and and relational stuff, and Jesus is teaching them through relational issues, especially the relational issue with God, which all of a sudden impacts everything else, healing, and then he's been feeding people like miraculously. They have thousands of people because he kind of was like the roaming rock star of the time, but he wasn't just like a fakey, hypocritical rock star. He was like a guy who was like actually healing people. He was like, I'm going to heal you. They're like, oh, no, you're not, Jesus. He's like, no, I will. And they're like, okay, let's see it. And then boom, they're healed. They're like, oh, wow, you are the rock star who actually does what they say they're going to do. So he's like going around, all these people are following him, and he's even feeding them miraculously. We saw that earlier in chapter 15. And so in this section, Jesus is gathering his disciples, and he tells them this. He says, I feel sorry for these people. I feel compassion would be an even better way of saying it. I feel a deep, like, gut compassion. Like, my heart goes out to these people. They have been here with me for 3 days. And he's a preacher, and some of you guys, I feel bad for you that you have to be listening to me all the time. You know, afterward, I'm like, Sarah, we should do something because I feel bad for these people like Jesus. But he's had them for 3 days, and they've had nothing to eat, he says, and I don't want to send them away hungry or they will faint along the way. So Jesus has been like feeding spiritual food. He's been teaching truth and helping people bring alignment into their hearts and their lives and kind of bringing them out of like they've been under this religious authority that's been really abusive. There was like really spiritual abuse. There's been really poor spiritual direction by different religious leadership groups, Pharisees and the Sadducees and other ones, and that have really been using their power to kind of subjugate people and to put more burdens on them and to kind of have behavioral modification or put lots of guilt so that they can kind of control or, you know, be kind of self-glorification, like we're more righteous than you, and if you want to be like us, you have to act like us and kind of be in our club. And so they've been dealing with that spiritual abuse, and Jesus is like releasing them from that burden. He's releasing them from those yokes, and he's saying, throw those yokes off, put my yoke on you. It's going to be light, it's going to be true, and it's going to actually give you the connection that you've been craving with God. And he sees, after he's been teaching them, that they're hungry. He has compassion for them. And the disciples' reaction, after all the healing, after already feeding thousands of people, after all his amazing teaching, the disciples say this. They're like, where would we get enough food here in the wilderness for such a huge crowd? Immediately, it's like they forget everything that they've been seeing, and they're like forget, and they're like, man, we're in the wilderness. Where are we going to get the food? They all of a sudden start worrying. They've got some anxiety. Like, what are we going to do? And they're like, Jesus, what they're saying is like, Jesus, you have good intentions, and we love you because you have great Jesus intentions. You're so loving. You're so kind. You're such a nice guy, and those intentions are nice. Kind of like your grandma, just that patronizing, oh, that's sweet. Honey, when you like declared when you were young, you were like, I'm going to be a garbage man, or I'm going to be, a famous writer. I'm going to play in the NFL. And, grandmas say, oh, that's nice, honey. They're kind of looking at Jesus and saying, that's nice, Jesus. Those intentions are good. But how are we going to do this? How are we going to turn this into action? How are we going to actually feed people? And Jesus looks at them. He's like, how much bread do you have? And they replied, 7 loaves and a few small fish. So Jesus told all the people to sit down. He's like, all right, everybody sit down. Like, there's like 4,000 men, which means there probably was an extra 4,000 women, if their wives were there. And then think of all the kids. So we're talking probably like over 10,000 people gathered listening to Jesus. Pretty cool, right? And he's like, okay, sit down. He's yelling, and they're trying to sit people down. Just sit down. People are hungry. They've been just soaking in what Jesus has to say. And then he took the 7 loaves and the fish, and thanked God for them and broke them into pieces. And he gave them to the disciples who distributed the food to the crowd. They all ate as much as they wanted, and afterward the disciples picked up 7 large baskets of leftover food. So they're making it clear this isn't just like a normal, like there's some bread maker, like making bread on the side really quickly. No, this is like a miraculous feeding, like in the Old Testament where God kind of sent the bread from heaven, the manna. If you don't know that story, you can check it out. But it's kind of hearkening back to some of Israel's history. And it says there were 4,000 men who were fed that day, in addition to all the women and children. Then Jesus sent the people home, and he got into a boat and crossed over to the region of Magadan. So I wanted to just note a few things before we move on from this section. If you're new to Whitewater, what we do is we kind of teach through the Bible here. We love the Bible. And I'm just going to make some observations as we go through Scripture I think are really helpful. They've been really helpful for me, and I'm excited to talk about them. But one of them is just that Jesus has compassion, but he doesn't just have compassion without action. Like, he has compassion that immediately turns into action. He says, they're hungry, so I'm going to feed them. Who's got some food? You've got some food? All right, I'm going to multiply it. God, he's tight with his Father, and he knows this is what God wants him to do, and then he makes it happen. And if you notice, Jesus, his whole ministry up to this point in Matthew, he's been communicating, I have this relationship with God where I listen to what my Father wants. I look where he's at work, and I move to him. So I listen to my Heavenly Father, I trust him, and then what does Jesus do? He adjusts to what his Father wants. Maybe he's tired. Maybe he wants to move on to the area of the region of Magadan. Maybe he wants to go there right now, but then he sees they're hungry. And he sees that, like, okay, God wants me to feed these people. So he adjusts and he's like, okay, we're going to do this. And his disciples are listening to Jesus and they're like, no, Jesus, like, that's nice intentions and stuff, but we can't do this. We're in the wilderness. And I know you've healed people. I know you've fed some other people, but this is going to be harder. And Jesus is like, are you kidding me? And he helps them listen to him. And he's like, come on, listen to me. And then okay, we'll trust you. And then they adjust and they end up handing out the bread. And I think that's cool that Jesus' disciples, people who want to start following Jesus, it's really important that we just first start listening to him. We start listening to God. We start looking for what God's doing and trusting it and then adjusting our lives to it. Really, really important, basic principle, right? But that's what we're seeing here. And God uses his apprentices. Jesus could have handed out the bread, or he could have been like, okay, bread, everybody has it in their hands, and like, oh, whoa. But he doesn't do that. He hands it to the disciples, and he uses them. They get to be a part of the process. And notice that what he gives them bread. Some dude had some bread and was like, if he'd been like, I want to keep my bread, he's like Milton from, Office Space or whatever, I want my stapler, my bread, and he's just keeping it for himself. Like, it wouldn't have gone out. But he had to share what God had given him, and then the disciples had to share and pay it forward. And there's this amazing thing when we start to do that. There's this principle that grace stretches. Grace always stretches. There's just this little bit, it seems like, not enough for everybody, and then it starts to stretch somehow, like the kingdom of God, like it grows somehow, like a mustard seed. Like all of a sudden when people start paying it forward, there's more than they ever imagined that they had. And all of a sudden by the end of this whole deal, they've got 7 huge baskets of grace food left over. And when I think of that grace stretches all the time, especially when we step out in trust and we say, okay, I'm gonna pay this forward. My buddy John Kelly and his wife Lauren, they really like hosting people and building friendships. And Lauren has like a gift where she loves to cook for people, but she, they've got a certain budget for food. They're not super wealthy. Maybe you guys thought they were, but they're not super wealthy. And they loved having people at their apartment complex into their home. They love, if there's someone sick at their apartment complex, going and helping them. And there's other people like that at our church, but this is one of the things we had been talking about this week. And they've got a certain budget, and that receipt, when they look at it, from the grocery store is, always probably around the same. And what they have to get and what they are able to get. But they've noticed that no matter how many people show up at their house, or someone who's hurting or someone who's sick, and they say, hey, we've got to make some food for them, we've got to bring it over. Or we're having a group of people and then like 10 extra people show up and they're like, oh, this is awesome, we're glad to have you. Well, put more water in the soup, But it always stretches. It's always enough. Isn't that cool how God does that? And just in simple ways, just with food. But spiritually that happens all the time. If we give some more of our time, all of a sudden we find that we're enriched and that we actually have time to stretch because grace stretches. There's a group, a pastor in Portland got a call from the mayor saying, hey, we have these issues with the school. There's this food problem. We don't know what to do. We've tried to do kind of the political route, and it hasn't been solving the issue. We really need help with this. We need it now. And he made one call to the pastor. That pastor called a bunch of his other pastor buddies. And with one phone call, they took care of like all the schools that needed help in Portland because grace stretches. And if disciples are ready to pass the bread forward, if we're ready to give the blessing that Jesus has given us, it stretches and it changes people. And people take notice and they're filled. These people were filled up. Pretty cool. I was talking with another leader recently. We do these like community groups that are like these groups, like an extended family that has a particular mission that says, we want to bring the love of God here. So they get that strong mission. I want to bring the love of God, to these people, to this youth group, youth demographic, or to, single moms that have kids, or, to this neighborhood. We want to bring the love of God here. We want to be those kind of disciples, and this is our family that does it. And when we do that, there's these faith steps, and you start building relationships, and the family starts growing. Well, there's a guy I was talking to, a leader, who wants to learn how to do that from our church. Like, he's looking at our church, our young, 3 years, church plant, and from a much larger church, and they're like, we want to see the stuff that people finding God, people like paying the bread forward and blessing others, and seeing these extended families, these communities, these community groups changing lives. We want to have that. And so he started one, and the first gathering had like 10 people, and they shared, and they talked about the Bible, and they talked about spiritual things, and it was cool, but it was mainly people, well, it was only people from their church. And now he's like, so I want to also get people that aren't just from our church, because that's like one of the big points of having a community group, is that everyone's invited, right? And so I was like, well, let's think about that. What are some ways that you could get some other people? And he's like, I don't know, like continue inviting them for, that Bible study. I was like, yeah, but what if they're not used to a Bible study? What if that's kind of weird for them at first? Like, like if you've ever like dated someone and you went to meet the parents the first time, and or you brought them over to your place, and then you have like weird traditions, the first thing you're going to ask your dad or mom if you're having someone over for the first time is, can we please not do that yet? Can we please not fight around the steel pole for Festivus tonight? Can we just push that off a little bit? Let's just ramp them in. Let's make it a little bit easier on them. Well, I was like, how can we make it a little bit easier? Well, what are things where people can be comfortable and they can experience the love of God? They can belong before they believe and have fun, eat, and that kind of thing. I don't know. It's like, well, you like football, right? Oh, I love football. It's like, how often do you watch it? I watch it Monday night, Thursday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and if there's, college, so it's got all these football times. It's like, what if you just tithed? What if you just gave one of those ones up, like Monday night, and said, hey, why don't you come over to my place? We're having a party. Invite your friends. We're not going to do any weird God talk. We're just going to hang out and be family together and enjoy. And I get super pumped about that, but there's this kind of look in his face. He's like, but I like my football. I don't want to give that up. I don't want to give that up. And there's this point where grace stretches to other people. But when it's stretching to other people through us, what does it do to us? Grace stretches us. It changes us. Because we're having to listen, trust, and adjust. We're having to change. We're having to change. Let's jump into chapter 16. You guys follow that? Yeah. So, I'm just going to read through this section really quickly. It says, one day the Pharisees and the Sadducees came to test Jesus, demanding that he show them a miraculous sign from heaven to prove his authority. And he replied, you know the saying, red sky at night means fair weather tomorrow, and red sky in the morning means foul weather all day. You know how to interpret the weather signs in the sky, but you don't know how to interpret the signs of the times. Only an evil and adulterous generation would demand a miraculous sign, but the only sign I will give them is the sign of the prophet Jonah. Then Jesus left them and went away. And I want to just jump to the beginning of that and just kind of make a few observations. But it's talking about the Pharisees and the Sadducees. One day the Pharisees and Sadducees came to test Jesus. Whenever someone goes to test Jesus in a really negative way, it's not usually going to end well for them. Okay, just putting that out there, okay? And he's gracious and he's good, but it's like running into a brick wall if you're like, I'm right. And Jesus is like, well, this is actually, no, I'm right. And it's like you're about to get bruised. You guys seen that commercial? The guy's running on the beach recently and he's like running. He's like, yeah, there's flowers and, birds in the air and there's a chick running with him. And then bam, he just slams right into the fridge. That's what's about to happen to these guys, okay? It's just so you know. Just wham, okay? wham! Okay, just make sure you guys are with me. That's what's happening. And just so you know, the Pharisees and Sadducees, natural enemies, don't like each other. But Jesus has this really special, disarming way of uniting people, especially as enemies, against himself. Okay, so these guys who would never hang out with each other ever become like frenemies of Jesus. Okay, like they want to get him. And so their idea of spirituality focuses on a few things. One, they preach this type of repentance that is a fake repentance. Repentance is what we've been talking about, listening to Jesus, trusting Jesus, and then adjusting. And it's especially in that adjustment where you step out in faith and you turn to what God would have you do. What they're saying is, if you guys are sinners, like they're looking at people who struggle, they're religious people, and they're like, we are the religious power, and we say that if you say these types of things, or you don't pray enough, or if you don't give enough to the synagogue, then you're sinners and you're low. You need to improve yourselves, and by doing that, you need to turn from your sin and do better things for us and for God. And so the way I talk about their repentance is turning from the dumb things that they didn't want people to be doing, that bugged them, to be doing other things that they liked more, but it was just as bad. Like, so here, let me give you an example. So one of the examples earlier was like, these people are, supposed to clean up their lives, pray more, and be better, and show up to church, and all that kind of stuff. And the Pharisees are like, yeah. But Jesus is looking at the Pharisees and like, but you guys don't even honor your parents. That's in the law. You guys lie. You guys desire bad things with your heart, but you pretend like you don't, and you tell people to follow you, and it's like the blind leading the blind. And so what happened is they're telling people to dig holes. It's the repentance of digging holes. Dig this hole, and then so you can fill this hole over here in your life. So you've got a major issue. You've got a relational issue. You've got a not going to church issue and not praying enough issue. So you need to fill that hole and repent. But the problem is when you fill that hole finally up and you've exhaustively worked on that aspect of your life, what's the problem? There's still a hole over here. You guys see that? There's a new hole. Different name, new problem. So they've been taking from one area of their life, filling over here, and all of a sudden there's this new hole, and they're like, and then the Pharisees are like, oh yeah, you've been neglecting your time with your kids, and you've been neglecting reading the Torah enough, and so all of a sudden, let's fill that hole, and they're like these excavators, constantly doing this weird repentance where okay, I fill that, but then what's the problem? Shoot, there's another hole, and it's a game you can't win. It's this bummer, spiritually abusive faith, and it's killing people. And Jesus is recognizing, he's like, you guys are ridiculous. You got to quit trying to fill your own hole. You got to turn to God and do what he wants you to do with your heart, do it with your actions, follow him, and he'll fill the holes. He'll take care of it, because grace stretches, because we're supposed to listen to Jesus, trust Jesus, and adjust our lives, and he takes care of the rest. Sometimes it's that simple. And that's their spirituality. And then they come to Jesus and they demand that he show them the miraculous signs from heaven to prove that you are who you say you are. And the whole story, these guys have been following him, seeing him heal people who couldn't walk. There's a dude on the ground. He can't walk. Jesus comes up to him, talks to him, says something. They're watching. He gets up and walks out. And they're like, Jesus, we want to see a miracle. And Jesus is like, are you blind? Are you kidding me? Jesus, we want to see real power. We want to see the kind of power we want. And Jesus feeds, 5,000 people, and they're like eating this bread, and they're like, this is pretty good. We want to see some real miracles, Not listening to him, not watching him, and they're blind. And they're saying, we're coming here to judge you, Jesus. You need to give us evidence that we can trust you. We're judging you. And Jesus flips it on these guys. Check this out. He says to the religious leaders, he says, you know the saying, red sky at night means fair weather tomorrow. Red sky in the morning means foul weather all day. You know how to interpret the weather signs in the skies. But listen to this. You know how to interpret, you can forecast the weather, which isn't your job. But you don't know how to interpret the signs, the spiritual signs of the day. Your job is to be spiritual leaders. You're supposed to be able to say, this is what God is doing. This is what the Torah says. This is how we connect with God. That's their job. Like that. I mean, they could be nice people. They could, maybe read, out in the synagogue. But their primary purpose as religious leaders is to say, this is what God's doing. This is what he's saying. Let's join him. Let's listen to him, trust him, and adjust our lives to him. And Jesus is saying, you can't do that. You guys, that's your one job and you can't do it. That's like getting on like one of those little planes that, people fly and getting in there and you're going to be flown to like Alaska or something, getting in the seat and, they get the engine going and you see a few other people in there with you and you look over and you're like, hey, I haven't ridden on a plane like this or, even with this, this charter, like, is this pretty good? And the engine's going and they're like, oh yeah, this is good. And it's pretty safe, right? And they're like, oh, this is the best pilot that we have. How many planes you guys have? Oh, only this one. Only this one. Okay. And he's just kind of rumbling like, well, tell me about this guy. They can see the pilot up there. And tell me about him. And he's like, oh, he's the best. He's got the best takeoff you'll ever be. I mean, it's just smooth. He can take you by the best sights to see. He's amazing. And you're like, oh, that sounds good. Okay, I feel a little bit better about that. He's passed most every of the tests that you're supposed to test. Most? And they're like, oh yeah, he's really good. The only thing he can't do is he can't land the plane. You're joking, right? No, but he's a really good trier. He tries really hard, and he's getting better. Has anybody survived this? He has. Like his one job is to fly a plane, but the most important part about flying a plane is what? It's landing it. Getting people safely from point A to point B. That's what these religious leaders, that's their job. To help them see what God's doing so God gets people from point A to point B. And they can't even do it. They're a joke. And Jesus is saying they're blind. And so he says this to them. He says, only an evil, an adulterous generation. He's saying that to them. Only people who are evil would demand what you're demanding. They would demand a miraculous sign. And I've been doing them all over and you can't see them. You're blind. So he says the only sign I'm going to give them is the sign of the prophet Jonah. And Jesus says, you guys are just doing delay tactics. I've been doing miracles. I could do more miracles. You don't want to accept what I'm doing. I'm not going to play your stupid game. Because it's like, I'm colorblind. I remember them showing me the colorblind circle, and you're supposed to like follow like a trail. I mean, you guys do this in elementary school or whatever. You have to follow a trail of, some color. And I did pretty good. I was like, 50%. But the other 50% meant that I was like, colorblind with these certain colors. And you could I'm red-green. I can see them a little bit, but someone who's severely colorblind, you could throw the color red in front of them and with a bunch of other colors, and they're not going to be able to distinguish it. They're not going to be able to see it. And so Jesus is saying, you guys are like colorblind, terrible leaders. And you're saying, we want to see miracles. He's like, God is at work all around you. Are you joking me? And he's like, when you guys demanding another miracle that you want to see is like the equivalent of someone saying, hey, can you see this color? No, I'm colorblind. I'll be right back. Come out with a bigger thing of that same color and saying, well, here's a bigger, color of red so you can see it. Still can't see it. I'll be right back. Let's get a bigger one. And throwing a bigger, red thing, and now I can't see it. Well, I'll be right back. Getting a darker red or more bright red or whatever. It doesn't matter if you like make the miracle bigger, if you make it more to their taste. If they're colorblind, they're not going to see the what? The color. These guys aren't, if they can't see God, they can't see the kingdom if it slapped them in the face. Jesus isn't going to like play that game. He's just not. But he does say, I'm going to give you the sign of the prophet Jonah. Jonah was a prophet who tried to run away from the people God was calling him to give a message that said, hey, you guys have acted really, really bad, and judgment is coming. It's coming, like the dawn. There's no other way around it. My judgment's coming. And Jonah didn't like these people, so he wanted them to be judged, and he ran away. And God was like, no, you're not going to run. And God had caused a storm when he was in the middle of the ocean, storm to come, and he ended up getting thrown in the ocean, and a great fish came and swallowed him for 3 days. And Jesus is saying, I'm going to give the sign of Jonah. And what he's saying is, I'm not going to try to like vindicate myself and play your little games? You want me to be your little magic, Jesus monkey and do what you want me to do? You're kidding me. No, but I am going to do something. And the sign of Jonah is that there's a man who went into a whale for 3 days and came out alive. He came out alive. And Jesus is saying, I'm going to give you the sign of Jonah where I'm going to be dead 3 days. Do something that's impossible, that no one's ever done, that no one ever could do, except for me. But I'm going to come back. How are you going to feel when I come back? You're right. You've got all the arguments. You've got all the spiritual. You've got your bunch of spiritual buddies that are saying I'm wrong. But I'm going to do the sign of Jonah. I'm going to come back. The power of God's going to raise me. What are you going to think of me then? It's like the dude who went to high school with Bill Gates and was always hearing about this computer thing and, this microbe stuff, and he's just this nerd, and he's, just when he'd see Bill Gates, hey Gates, just hit him in the head with a ball, or, at lunch, hey Gates, smack him in the back of the head, and, everybody's laughing, you got Gates. Until, 1980s hit, and someone sees you and they're like, aren't you that guy that used to pick on Bill Gates? No, you're that idiot, aren't you? No, I'm not. No, hey, Bill, this is the guy that used to pick on you. Jesus is saying, I'm going to come back. What are you going to think of me then? You've been saying you're with God, you know what God's doing, you're leading people your way, and all of a sudden you realize you're leading them toward hell. And the one who is telling you the truth, the one who's teaching about repentance, turning to God with the message that I'm not the one under judgment here, fellas. He's turning the table and saying, you guys are the ones being judged. Get with the program. Later after they crossed, this is verse 5, later after they crossed to the other side of the lake, the disciples discovered they had forgotten to bring any bread. Watch out, Jesus warned them. Beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He says, beware of their yeast. It's like, what's he talking about? At this, they began to argue with each other because they hadn't brought any bread, and Jesus knew what they were saying. So he said again, you have so little faith. Why are you arguing with each other about having no bread? Don't you understand even yet? Don't you remember the 5,000 I fed with 5 loaves and the baskets of leftovers you picked up? Or the 4,000 I fed with 7 loaves and the large baskets or leftovers you picked up? Don't you remember that? Verse 11, why can't you understand that I'm not talking about bread? So again, I'll say, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He repeats that again. When Jesus repeats something that's usually pretty important, you might want to underline this, right? And then he says, then at last they understood that he wasn't speaking about the yeast in the bread, but about the deceptive teachings of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So they transformed from not understanding what Jesus was talking about at all to understanding what's going on here. How many of you guys have kids, little kids? All right, we've got a big, this is awesome. I love Whitewater. We've got so many kids, it's like busting out, and it's just really cool what God's doing. My wife lived with a family, and they had this little kid named Isaiah. And if you've noticed, maybe your kid isn't this way, but there's like a phase I think kids go through where all they know is to take whatever you say very literally, all right? So if you're like, hey, keep your eye on that, you might come back in a little bit, and their eye is like literally, on the food that you told them to watch. They're like, you said to keep my eye on it, Dad. Like, good job, son. Making me proud. Well, Sarah was with this kid named Isaiah, and they had a hot dog out, and he started grabbing it to eat it, and his dad was like, no. We got to throw that in the microwave, buddy. And he turned to go over here. You guys know what happened? He's heard this thwack. The dude has a hand cannon, okay? Isaiah, he was proud that his son was revealing that he had a very good athletic build. But this kid just chucked this hot dog at the microwave as hard as he could and just looked at his dad. Now can I eat it? Can I eat it now? Just, and that's what you said, right? He didn't understand the subtext. He was just being really literal. And Jesus is like, there's this point where as adults, as people, we have to go from understanding things literally to also seeing the subtext of things. And if you don't ever figure that out, life is going to be really tough. And I see some women like elbowing their husbands, some subtext. And you picking anything up right now? And Mark Williams. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry, man. I just ratted you out. Such a jerk, Pastor. But there's a point where we spiritually have to start to see that. And the Pharisees had a hard time picking up the subtext. Even the disciples did. Why were they having a hard time understanding what Jesus was saying? And I think if we go back up to verse 8, they're arguing and they're anxious probably about the Pharisees being hard on them. They're anxious about having enough bread. We need to have enough provision to make it. We need to be taken care of. And who's the idiot who forgot? And then blaming and all this arguing breaks out. And Jesus is just like, can you imagine? Jesus is like, oh, it's like my disciples, the ones who are going to change the world. And they're just like fighting each other. And who forgot the bread? Judas, you were the one who was supposed to bring it. He's like, no, I told you I was counting the money, And they're just all arguing. And just like, you have so little faith. And like, what are you talking about? We're talking about bread, Jesus. We're trying to find it. What does faith have to do with that? You have so little faith. Why are you arguing with each other about having no bread? Don't you understand what I'm saying? Haven't you listened and understood? And so this passage, this section is all about understanding Jesus. It's understanding what he's saying to us. It's understanding what God wants for us. That's what this is about. Like the Pharisees are the issue right now, but he's saying like the issues always come up. Don't you understand yet? And I think what this is saying, like there's anxiety, there's, blame, there's frustration. And Jesus is saying, guys, don't you get it? Your heart, for us, it's like a radio. It's like a radio. When I'm driving down to Portland to school, I'll be driving, if I'm listening to sports radio or the Huskies are on or something, I'll be listening and it's usually an AM station. And AMs suck if you're traveling anywhere. Because what? And all of a sudden, Keith Price goes back to throw. He throws a long pass and then I got friends in low places. And some stupid country thing comes on and you're like, are you kidding me? And then all of a sudden comes on, touchdown, that was the most amazing. No! And you're just like frustrated. And I'm trying to listen to this thing and there's all these frequencies coming in. And you have to like zone it in if you're going to really listen. You got to tune in to the right channel. You got to really zone it in. If it's off a little bit, it's no bueno. It's no good. And what's happening here is in our lives, man, there's a lot of like emotional kind of static that comes in emotional distractions. Anxiety is about life. Anxiety is about relationship. Anxiety about where the rent's going to come from. Anxiety about like just being good enough for people or asking that question. If people really knew me, would they accept me? What about my kids? And my kid's been really sick. I'm really worried. There's things that come in that are when we're trying to know what God is saying to us. When we're trying to have great faith, if we're like got all the static and we're not tuned in, we're going to be missing signal, we're going to be missing stuff, and we're going to be acting just like the disciples. We're going to be missing what Jesus is saying. We're not going to be understanding it. Can you guys relate to this? If you're also listening to the channel, have you ever had it where someone's like they're really like low volume listener? I was a drummer for years, so like I have to like jack the stereo up to hear like voices very well. Even when I'm in a crowd, I have a hard time hearing if there's a lot of white noise. I have to like really lean in. And if you want to hear the stereo even better, you got to obviously get to the right channel, tune in, and then you got to turn it up. And Jesus says, don't you remember the 5,000 I fed? Don't you remember the 4,000 I fed? Don't you remembering and being thankful for the good things that God is doing all around us that we forget all the time? Remembering, and being thankful and being thankful and being thankful is how we turn the radio up. It's how we can start to hear him better. We tune in, we get rid of the distractions. Even if you have to objectively step away and say, if I wasn't me, and I was looking at my situation and how I'm acting with this person, or how I'm acting with this frustration that I have, with this boss, or with this, this person that goes to my church, if I were to step back and just look at it, try to objectively look and remember what God's doing and be thankful and just say, what would I tell that person? What would I tell me if I wasn't me? So that I could tune in. So I could hear. Even if we do that, those are moments. That is how we turn the radio up. That's how we hear God better. Thankfulness, remembering the goodness of God, telling our stories over and over again, remembering the stories of how God delivered his people who never deserved it, but his grace stretches, doesn't it? It stretches to us every day. And we can stretch that grace out if we are willing to hand those blessings on, if we're willing to listen to what Jesus is saying, to pick up on the signal, to tune out the noise and tune into him and to turn him up. Then we all of a sudden start listening in to our stories, the things where God, man, you saved me. Like my grandpa has this list where he was really down and struggling. He just said, I'm going to write down all the times that God saved me. And as he was writing it down, page after page after page started filling up. I remember when God saved me when I was in the Navy. I almost fell off the edge of a cliff. There was a blizzard, couldn't see anything, and all of a sudden something said to me, stop. And he stopped. 30 seconds later, this blizzard clears, and he's on the edge of a cliff. Glad he tuned in, wasn't he? He stepped on the landmine when he was in the same island and was standing on it, a Japanese landmine up in the Aleutian Islands. And he's looking around. He's like, he's been on this boat this whole, for like months. And he's like, I'm going to just run as fast as I can. And he just took off down this mountain. And the mine must have been really rusty or something because it took its time to come back up. But when it did, it exploded. And he just remembers running and all of a sudden, just flying forward from the blast. Clods of dirt, stuff all over him, checking his body to see if he was okay. And he was okay. He's like, I don't know why I stopped. I don't know, fully why I was going to run. But he's like, God saved me. Remembering our story, turning up the volume spiritually. Don't dig the holes. Don't listen to the Pharisees. Tune them out. Tune out your anxieties. Quit trying to trust in other things to provide for you. Trust that your Father's going to bring the bread. Trust that his bread is going to stretch. That his grace is going to stretch into your life. And I think that sometimes Jesus is kind of asking that. He's saying to us, why don't you understand me yet? Don't you remember when I saved you? Don't you remember this person I brought in your life that you're frustrated with all this stuff, but I just might be doing something through that person in your life? Maybe this isn't about the house thing that you're going through. Maybe I'm trying to teach you something else. Maybe it wasn't about the bread. Maybe it was about listening to me, to the disciples. Maybe he's saying to you today. Maybe he's been saying to you for the last months, the last year. Maybe it's not about the job. Maybe it's not about how your wife or your husband is just angry right now. Maybe there's something more that I'm trying to say to you right now. Are you listening? Are you tuning in? That's what I'm saying. Are you listening? Are you trusting? Are you adjusting your life? I wanted to leave us with this thought. I was over in Midwest at this pastor's thing, teaching us how to be missional, how to reach out to people, that kind of thing. So it's very serious. You sit everybody's sitting here listening to me, you listen to people, and you go talk to other pastors and that kind of stuff. And we went back to the hotel, and I was talking with this guy about how to be missional. All of a sudden, these drunk Irishmen came in. They're like, "Hey there, laddie, you want a beer?" And I was like, "No, I'm cool. We're talking." And we started talking, and they didn't care. They just set a beer next to me, and we're pounding back a bunch of them, totally Irish. And I had an Irish roommate, so I can say that, I guess. I like Irish people, and I think I am Irish, so that's cool. We're talking about all this stuff. We're, missional things, how you reach people, how you meet people with that, and God brings them, and you got to be paying attention, got to be listening, you got to be trusting God and adjust to what He's doing. We're talking about this stuff, and this guy's, he's like, "Hey, you want to hear a story?" I'm like, "No, dude, we're talking. I'm talking about being missional here. Go away, strange Irishman. I don't even know why you're here talking to me." And God's like, "I've got something to teach you." So finally I start talking to him. I'm like, okay, I can't get these guys to go away. So we start talking, and they're talking about all the fun they're having. "Oh yeah, we're seeing all the ladies and having so much fun. The States are really grand." And I'm like, "That's cool." And we're hearing these kind of blue collar guys away from home stuff. And then all of a sudden they start talking about their families, and it starts going deeper. And then they haven't even asked what we're doing, who we are. That I'm a pastor or anything. They're like, my kids, I take them to this church, and they go there, and the pastor doesn't teach them, and I don't feel like they're learning from God, and I feel like a bad father." And I'm like, all of a sudden it just goes deep. And I looked at my buddy, I'm like, dude, like, what do you think? Do you think it's important that your kids, like, are hearing from the Lord, like, what they need to be hearing? And he's like, oh, yeah. Like, well, what are they doing that's not helping them? He's like, oh, they're telling them they got to wear this and they can't do that. And everything they're telling them is making them hate Jesus. He's like, and I don't even know if I like Jesus, but I don't want my kids hating Jesus. I was like, I don't want your kids hating Jesus. And we started going deeper and deeper. And finally, the guy, as we talked, he found out we're pastors, and he started asking us more questions. And we're like, it is about a relationship. You're right, man. God might be speaking to you to tell you to help your kids access Jesus, or go to an environment where they're not going to learn to hate him because they think he's this way when he's not. And he's like, oh, yes, that's deep. That's deep, brother. Like, it's not that deep, but it's maybe the beer's deep right now. And he left, and he was going to go take his family. They're going to go try some evangelical churches, because he was used to some ones that were not as promotional of relationship and grace. I don't know if he did it, but God was sure speaking to me there, right? He was telling me, just access this. I had to just trust that God was going to take care of it, but I had to adjust what I was doing, talking about mission, and do mission. So my question for you today is, what has God been laying on your heart? What has God been saying to you? What has he been doing in your life? And have you said yes to him? Have you turned your compassion, have you turned whatever Jesus has been saying into action? Have you been doing it? And maybe that's a step into faith. Maybe it's saying, God, okay, I'm going to step and trust you with my life. I'm going to become what everybody calls Christian, but I just want to follow you, Jesus. But sometimes it's not even that big. If you're way far from Jesus, or you've been a Christian for a long time and you're shipwrecked, maybe it's just the next step for you. Just saying yes to the next thing. To calling that person, forgiving, asking for forgiveness. Maybe that's just that simple. Maybe it's just picking up your Bible and starting to read it. What's God been saying to you? And have you been saying yes? I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray. Jesus, some of us haven't been listening. Some of us haven't been looking. We've been like disciples. We've even maybe been like the Pharisees and Sadducees, Lord, demanding that you do miracles and you speak to us the way we want to be spoken to. And we've been missing it, God. We've been missing it. We've been listening to other distractions. We've been keeping the stereo low so we can, talk about other things and just keep you tuned out. God, I pray that you would just be a megaphone in our hearts today, and that we would look at our lives, that we would look at what you're doing, we would look at our past, we would look even in the hard things, God, even in the hardship. You went to the cross. That's what you were telling your son Jesus to do. Go to the cross. That doesn't sound fun. It doesn't seem like there's joy in it, but that's the sign of Jonah, that you were going to come out on the other end so that you could reconcile the world, that you could forgive sins, that you could give freedom, that you could bring healing, that you could bring heaven to earth and change and wreck our lives in the most wonderful way, and that your grace could stretch through our hearts and through our lives. And God, I want to recognize that sometimes the first step, if we haven't been hearing anything, is just starting the conversation. And so I pray if that's where some people are at, that they just start the conversation, and then step by step start saying yes and moving toward you. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. You want to stand? Let's worship.